How journalists decide on what makes a good science story has got very little to do with what's true or what's actually got any evidence behind it. I think the media's greatest ever science hoax has been the MMR story, something which they almost invented entirely for themselves.
The vaccine for measles, mumps and rubella, which is given to most children over the age of 1, has been linked with autism.
What was interesting about Andrew Wakefield's paper in 1998 is it was a case series report. It's a perfectly valid kind of thing to do, but it's just a collection of 12 anecdotes written up in a single paper. That can't tell you anything about a link between MMR and autism, simply because MMR and autism are both very common. So to find a few kids who've had both MMR and then gone on to develop autism isn't very special. I mean, that's extraordinary behaviour on the part of the media to selectively only cover dubious, worrying evidence whilst totally ignoring all of the reassuring stuff that was fully published. Even when they're trying to produce sensible news coverage, they still insist on doing everything in the most frightening way they can.
In 15 minutes, 200 of you emailed us about the vaccine. It's only a straw poll, but 182 of you expressed concern or confusion.
If you talk to journalists and say, why did you go to town on this evidence that was clearly not supporting the hypothesis that MMR causes autism, all they will ever say to you is, well, there was an expert from a medical school telling us that this was true. Proper scientists with a good publication record of doing sensible work were publishing exactly the same kind of research, but showing negative results, and they were completely ignored. That was because the story had become a political story more than a science story. MMR kicked off properly in 2002 when a little boy called Leo Blair became old enough to have the MMR vaccine.
He still won't confirm that his son Leo has had the triple vaccine.
They said at the time that this was because of privacy concerns, that we must respect their right to privacy, an argument which is slightly undermined by the fact that Cherry Blair has now since written in her autobiography about the actual fuck which conceived the child. Once the story became about Leo Blair, it was suddenly the domain of generalist journalists, the glamorous, more famous columnists, the people who normally would be telling us about a very funny thing the au pair said on the way to a dinner party, were suddenly giving the nation incredibly complex health advice on matters of immunology and epidemiology. Andrew Wakefield's up in front of the GMC and an entire nation of journalists are queuing up to blame him, one man, as the scapegoat for their crimes. And that just goes to show, really, how little they understand their role in all of this.
For his supporters, Andrew Wakefield is a hero, and despite prompting a major health scare, he seemed unrepentant.
No regrets, thank you.
The journalists' fantasy about MMR causing autism has run for 10 solid years.